Over the last 24 hours, the situation between the United States, Israel, and Iran has escalated fast. Things are moving so quickly, and honestly, the headlines can be pretty confusing. So today, we're going to break it all down step by step, like a strategic analysis tutorial. We're going to look at exactly what happened, unpack the military and political thinking behind the moves, and give you a solid framework for making sense of all this chaos.
So how do we make sense of this mess? Here's our game plan. We've got a 5-part framework. We'll kick things off with the strange strategic paradox that really sparked this whole thing. Then, we'll get our hands dirty with a deep dive into the battlefield, looking at the moves and countermoves. After that, we'll shift to the total breakdown in diplomacy. From there, we'll trace the shockwaves ripping across the Middle East. And finally, we'll connect the dots to the very real consequences for the entire world. This is our roadmap. Let's get into it. All right, let's jump right in with Section 1, the strategic paradox. This is all about the core contradiction that really ignited the last 24 hours. It's an event that not only threw gasoline on the fire with Iran, but also revealed a really deep, kind of alarming fracture in the alliance between the US and Israel.
And that brings us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? The United States says, okay, we're hitting pause. And then, literally minutes later, its closest ally in the region, Israel, launches a huge new attack. So what was this? A catastrophic miscommunication? A massive screw-up at the highest levels? Or was it something else? A deliberate, calculated move by Israel to go it alone to force the hand of its superpower ally? The answer to that question, well, it changes how we see everything that follows. The speed of this is just staggering. I mean, look at this timeline. At the top of the hour, President Trump announces a 5-day pause on hitting Iranian energy targets. He even says there are productive talks happening behind the scenes. This is a very clear, very public signal to de-escalate. But just 40 minutes later, less time than it takes to grab lunch, the Israeli Defense Forces unleash a brand new, aggressive wave of airstrikes on Tehran. This immediate, public split in strategy is the paradox we really need to unravel. Okay, time for our battlefield analysis. Let's shift gears from the what to the how. We're going beyond the headlines here to really examine the specific military actions, the weapons being used, and the strategic goals behind them. This is where we see how those high-level political decisions actually play out on the ground. You know, Israel's approach here was incredibly surgical. While they clearly broke the spirit of the US call for a pause, they technically followed the letter of it. The IDF strikes weren't just random attacks. No, they hit very specific high-value military sites. The IRGC's Air Defense and Ground Forces HQ, a base for the elite Quds force, and a key intelligence site. Think of these as the nervous system of Iran's military. And, crucially, they made a point to avoid the energy infrastructure President Trump mentioned. The goal seems pretty clear. Blind Iran's command and control while trying to keep just enough plausible deniability to manage the diplomatic fallout with Washington.
Iran's response? Yeah, it was not subtle. It was fast and it was heavy. A missile carrying what's estimated to be a 100-kilogram warhead was fired right at Tel Aviv. And what's really significant here is that it seems to have gotten past Israel's incredibly sophisticated air defense systems, like the Iron Dome. It slammed right into a central civilian area, causing injuries. This wasn't just a tit-for-tat retaliation, it was a message. Iran was showing the world that even under all this pressure, it can still land a very painful punch on Israel's biggest city.
Now, to really get what Iran does next, you have to wrap your head around this number, 330. For weeks now, Israel has been running what analysts call a launcher hunting campaign, using everything from satellites to drones to find and destroy Iran's mobile missile launchers before they can fire. And it has been devastatingly effective. The IDF claims they've taken out about 330 of Iran's roughly 470 launchers. That's almost 70% of their main offensive weapon just gone. This catastrophic loss is the key piece of data that explains the huge strategic pivot we're about to see from Tehran. And you can see that pivot happening right here in this chart. Over the past 5 days, the sheer number of Iranian missile launches has just collapsed, from a peak of around 90 a day down to only 10 today. Now, on the surface, you might look at this and think, great, Israel's winning, Iran is running out of steam, but that interpretation is dangerously simple. This data doesn't tell the whole story. It's not just about how many missiles are flying anymore, it's about what kind of missiles are flying. And this right here, this is Iran's new reality. With most of its launchers destroyed, it has to adapt. So Iran is moving away from what's called a saturation strategy. Firing tons of smaller missiles, hoping to overwhelm defenses with sheer numbers. Instead, it's shifting to a decapitation strategy. This means using its few remaining, more advanced launchers to fire a small number of missiles with much heavier, more precise warheads. They're aiming for high-value targets, and that strike on Tel Aviv was a perfect, terrifying example. It's a clear pivot from quantity to quality, designed to cause maximum damage with every single hit. And while Iran is being forced to adapt, its adversaries are going on offense, proactively expanding the battlefield. First, the U.S. just approved sending thousands more Marines to the region. This is stoking intense speculation that they're getting ready for an operation to seize Kharg Island, which is Iran's main oil terminal. That would be a massive blow to Iran's economy. And at the same time, Israel announced its own major operation. It's going to seize territory in southern Lebanon to create a permanent buffer zone against Hezbollah. These aren't defensive reactions. These are bold, aggressive moves designed to permanently change the strategic map of the Middle East.
Okay, let's switch from the battlefield to the back channels. In Section 3, we're looking at the diplomatic disconnect. Because believe me, the war of words and signals happening right now is every bit as chaotic and contradictory as the actual fighting.
The public messaging is completely fallen apart. I mean, you've got Washington, where President Trump is telling one story, claiming productive talks are happening, even saying Iran agreed to never have a nuke. And then you have Tehran, where the parliament speaker is telling a totally different story, flat out denying any talks and calling the whole idea fake news. These aren't just slightly different spins. These are two completely opposite realities being broadcast to the world, creating massive uncertainty for everyone.
So to really get one of the biggest diplomatic moves, we need a quick definition. Persona non grata. It's Latin for an unwelcome person. In the world of diplomacy, it's basically the nuclear option. It means you're officially kicking a foreign diplomat out of your country. It's a huge slap in the face. And this is exactly what the Lebanese government just did to Iran's ambassador in Beirut.
So with direct communication totally broken, third parties are trying to step in. Pakistan has officially offered to play mediator, proposing to host direct talks between the U.S. and Iran in its capital. This is a pretty big deal. Pakistan has complicated but long-standing relationships with both countries, which makes it one of the few places that could possibly act as a neutral go-between. It offers a very fragile but potential off-ramp from all-out war, if both sides are willing to take it.
All right, Section 4. Let's pull the lens back a bit and look at the regional shockwaves. The actions in Tehran, Tel Aviv, and Washington are not happening in a vacuum. Not at all. They are sending powerful, destabilizing ripples all across the Middle East, dragging new players into the mix and dramatically expanding the scope of this conflict. This table really shows you just how far this conflict has spread in only a few days. We're now seeing Iranian drones intercepted over the Arabian Peninsula as Tehran lashes out at U.S. allies in the Gulf. There was a confirmed, though failed, Iranian missile strike aimed at the critical U.S.-UK airbase on Diego Garcia deep in the Indian Ocean. And even over in the Mediterranean, a European ship had to shoot down an Iranian missile near Cyprus. The war is no longer contained to one spot. It's spilling out across the entire region. Let's circle back to Lebanon kicking out the Iranian ambassador because honestly, the strategic importance of this is huge. Sources on the ground are calling it a historic break from decades of Iranian influence. For years, Iran has had enormous power inside Lebanon through its proxy, Hezbollah. This move, it signals that the Lebanese state, facing the terrifying possibility of a full-scale Israeli invasion, is making a desperate gamble to cut those ties, to assert its own independence, and to try to pull itself out of Iran's orbit before it's too late. This is a massive crack in Iran's so-called axis of resistance. And finally, in our last section, let's zoom the lens all the way out to see the global consequences. This is no longer just a regional crisis. It's already having tangible, painful effects on the global economy, the environment, and international security. This is the part that explains why this conflict matters to everyone, no matter where you live. This is what you call weaponizing geography. Iran has heavily mined the Strait of Hormuz. That's the narrow channel where about 20% of the world's entire oil supply has to pass through. And right now, it's effectively closed for business. The result was immediate. Brent crude oil prices have shot back up over $100 a barrel. That massive spike in energy costs acts like a tax on the entire global economy, and it's sparking real fears of a new worldwide recession. By closing this strait, Iran is basically holding the global economy hostage. And beyond the strategy and the economics, there is a devastating human and ecological cost. The fallout from those earlier strikes on Iran's oil depots is now becoming tragically clear. Residents in Tehran, a city of 9 million people, are reporting this horrifying thing called black rain falling from the sky. It's a toxic mix of water, soot, and chemicals from the burning oil. This is creating a severe public health crisis, a tragic and very visible consequence of war for millions of ordinary people. And we have to remember, this whole explosive situation is happening with the ticking clock in the background. President Trump's declared pause on hitting those Iranian energy sites, the very same sites causing that toxic rain, is for 5 days. That clock is counting down. Every single action by every party is being calculated against that deadline. The pressure to make a move before that window closes is just immense.
And so that's where we're at. We started with the paradox of a broken alliance. We analyzed a battlefield that's being transformed by desperation and technology. We've seen diplomacy completely collapse into a war of competing stories. We've watched the region literally realign in real time. And after breaking down all these moving parts, we are left with the ultimate question. With the old rules out the window and the clock ticking down, who truly holds the strategic advantage right now? And what are they going to do with it next?